First thing I'm going to do when I look at this passage is I'm going to look for any words that I see that are repeating. So I see a lot of rocky and rocks and rock and rocks and rocks and lots and lots of rocks, and so on and so forth. So if I know that it's continuously repeating over and over again, that probably means that it's going to be important. It might be the topic of this passage. Another thing that I saw repeating just from glancing over it was form. I'm actually going to make this a different color. So it says that rocks form. It says that they divide it based off of the way they form. Igneous rocks form, sedimentary rocks form, so on and so forth. Reformed. All right, so those are also repeated. So I know that maybe my passage has something to do with rocks forming. So when I read this, I'm going to set my purpose for reading. And I am going to stop and jot and write what I think the main idea about each paragraph is. Okay, so let's begin. The first thing I'm going to do when I'm trying to find what the main idea of the paragraph is, before I fill out my chart, is I'm going to separate each paragraph. If you don't know how to separate the paragraphs, it is the first place that the paragraph is indented, where it has this little space. Okay? And at the end of it, I'm going to stop and jot what I think that this paragraph and this paragraph, all of it is about. When I'm finished, I'm going to fill it into my chart to help me figure out what the main idea is. So let's read the first one together. Our world is a rocky place, and while plants, soil, and water may cover much of the Earth's surface, underneath there's solid rocks. Rocks form from minerals joining together. Although there are dozens of different types of rocks found on Earth, geologists generally divide them into three main classes based off the way they form. I know that it's talking about rock. It talks about the Earth's surface being made of rocks, and that rocks are forms of minerals joined together, and that they're talking about that rocks are categorized into three types based off of the way they form. So what I'm going to stop and jot off to the side would be, I want you to write your own and then come back together. Mine is going to say, how the Earth's surface is made from rocks forming. Okay, so I think that that's what this first paragraph is about. Let's read the next one together. Igneous rocks form from liquid that has cooled and solidified. The word igneous comes from the Greek term meaning from fire. Extrusive igneous rocks, like basalt, form from lava pouring out of volcanoes. Intrusive igneous rocks, like granite, form from the slow cooling of magma under the surface. So, I saw that igneous also repeated multiple times in this paragraph. If it is talking specifically about rocks is my topic and how they form, it is talking about how igneous rocks form. So that's what I'm going to stop and jot. Igneous rocks form. I know that this is what that paragraph is about. If I read my next one, I'm trying to figure out what it's trying to tell me. Sedimentary rocks form when pieces of other rocks' sediment have joined together. Most sedimentary rocks have their particles either cemented or compressed together. Sedimentary rocks usually form in the presence of water, and they include sandstone, shale, and limestone. So that was the end of my paragraph. So what other words do I see that are repeating? I know that I have rocks and how they form, but specifically this paragraph is telling me how sedimentary rocks form. So I'm going to write that off to the side. This paragraph is going to tell me how sedimentary rocks form. For this last one, I want for you to figure out what this last paragraph is going to tell me. Metamorphic rocks like gneiss, schist, and marble form when the pre-existing rocks have been subjected to intense heat and pressure deep below the Earth's surface. Metamorphic means change of form. Unlike igneous rock, which require melting, and metamorphic rocks never completely melt. Instead, the change happen in a solid state due to pressure and heating. What is the main idea just of this paragraph? What is it telling me? If I know that it has to talk about how rocks form, which rock is it talking about forming? You should choose metamorphic. The entire paragraph tells me all about how metamorphic rocks form. So that's what I'm going to stop and write to the side. The last sentence says, over time, minerals get recycled as rocks get reformed by these three processes. The passage of the mineral from one type of rock into another is called the rock cycle. So, if it's talking about the three processes in how one rock turns from another, what is it actually called? What does it have to do with rocks forming? It's talking about the rock cycle. So I know that this paragraph's talking about the rock cycle. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pick what we've stopped and jotted, and we are going to write it in our chart. Okay? So when you're looking at this chart, remember, this is the main idea. We want all of our supporting details all to be able to relate back to the main idea. So let's look at what we stopped and jotted. When we stopped and jotted, the first one talked about how the Earth's surface is made from rocks forming. How igneous rocks form, how sedimentary rocks form, metamorphic rocks form, and the rock cycle. So let's fill in what we stopped and jotted to the supporting details. What were they talking about? Well, they talked a lot about how igneous rocks formed. What did the middle part talk about? Fill in these last two boxes and tell me what you think the last couple of paragraphs were talking about. You should have put how sedimentary rocks are formed and how metamorphic rocks were formed. So now I'm looking at this as the reader. I stopped and I jotted these as my main points about what the entire passage was about. So what do these all have in common? They all talk about how rocks form, right? So my main idea is going to relate back to how rocks form. Specifically, it's going to talk about how the 1, 2, 3 types of rock form. And the way I can check my work is I can ask myself, look at this detail. How igneous rocks form. Does that relate back to the main idea that this passage is talking about how 3 types of rock form? I would say yes, because igneous rocks is one of the 3, and it talks about how it's formed. You can ask yourself the same question for the following 2. Does how sedimentary rocks form relate back to how the 3 types of rock form? Yes, because it is one of the 3, and it talks about how it's formed. The same goes for metamorphic rocks.